Please welcome Chief Executive Officer, Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian, for a discussion with Skift Aviation Business Editor, Brian Summers.
Thanks, Ed, for meeting us here.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I have a lot of fun questions here about seats and Wi-Fi and passenger experience. But you guys got caught in some news yesterday. There's a trade dispute between Bombardier and Boeing. You bought a lot of Bombardier planes recently, about 75 of them.
C-Series is a great plane.
Yep. And the Commerce Department said it is considering adding a 220% tariff to these planes. That could make them unaffordable for you, but it is preliminary. What's going on?
Well, we think it's absurd to start with. It's a technical ruling. The real question for us will be when Boeing is able to show some harm, because this was a Boeing action that Boeing was instigating. When we made the decision to purchase the C-Series, and the C-Series is going to be a great airplane, we baked off against Boeing, and Boeing did not have any planes in the category. In fact, they stopped making the plane 10 years ago, the 717, which we operate today, which we would have loved to have continued to had an opportunity to bid. Instead, they bid used Embraers and lost.
And those were from Air Canada.
From Air Canada. So how this is somehow a U.S. trade dispute is, to me, is bizarre. But that said, it's a technical ruling, and I'm confident when the right minds come together around this, a good decision will be taken.
So the next step is that Bombardier tries to explain to the government that they're really not competing with Boeing here.
Well, we're not in the middle of it. We're trying to stay out of the middle of it. Right. It's really between two very important partners of ours, both Boeing and Bombardier, and we've been clear at Delta that we expect them to resolve it themselves, and certainly not at Delta's harm.
Okay. Something interesting about the C-Series that people may not know is that most people think that all airplanes are the same inside because they look the same, but apparently this is a really comfortable aircraft, right?
This is a great airplane, and everyone in this room would love to fly in it. I think it'll be our best domestic aircraft. It's not an expanded regional jet. This has wider seats on it. It's got a larger, more spacious interior. It's got wide body windows on a narrow body chassis, and it's going to have all the technology, Wi-Fi, live TV. It's going to be kitted well, and it's going to go into long markets as well as short markets because it's going to have that level of comfort.
Okay. I know that you say that you're confident that Bombardier will prevail in some way, but if it doesn't and there's a 220% tariff on these planes, does that mean Delta can't take them?
We do not think there will be a 220% tariff when it's all said and done.
Okay. So the more exciting from passenger experience standpoint announcement that you wanted to make this morning is you're going to allow free texting on the airplanes, right?
Yeah, so we announced this morning that we are going to, starting this weekend, so it's not long term, it's starting this weekend, we're going to be introducing free text messaging on all Delta planes, all Delta planes that have Wi-Fi, anywhere in the world. And it will be free. Yep. Thank you. It'll be free. And the only planes that will not have it are the small 50-seat regional jets because they don't have any Wi-Fi on it. But as long as a plane has Wi-Fi, it'll be free on Delta.
Okay. Let me ask you a question you've been getting at conferences for probably 5 years. Why historically has airline Wi-Fi been so bad, and what have you guys done about it?
I ask that question every day, okay? And I travel every day, and Michael Small, the CEO of GoGo, and we've got a very good relationship with, but I call him No-Go, and I am not kind. Michael has a chair in our conference room that's got his name underneath it that he comes and sits in when he meets with me, and it's not a good chair. It's the bad chair. And they are, with all due respect though, they are making a lot of progress. The new 2KU bandwidth, that the satellite that's being installed and will be on The majority of our mainline planes by early part of next year has the capability to have full bandwidth capacity on it so that we don't have to police usage by pricing. As I've told Michael many times, he's got the worst business model in the world, is that, rather than trying to get customers to use the product, they get customers to avoid the product by jacking up the fares to kick people off the use. It's just it's a goofy model. It's part of the development cycle we're in. Long term, I think satellite will be free on Delta, just like it is on the ground. It should be free in the air as well. And long term, it will have the capacity and the bandwidth capable for people to stream whatever they want to stream on board our planes. It's just going to take us some time to get the technology there.
Okay, the problem with free, Michael will often say, is that somebody has to pay for it. Does that mean that GoGo would pay for it, or maybe you would work with sponsors and try to make it free that way?
We have lots of ideas and opportunities. Right now, we don't have the technical capability, but when you think about the Holy Grail, in our business, one of the Holy Grails in our business is where you've got a cabin of 200 people that are contained, and you have an opportunity to have direct access to them. There's an economic model that makes that free.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a little bit of a question about what's going on in the news right now. I love to fly. You probably love to fly. I bet a lot of you even love to fly. But if you read the news...
And you especially love to fly Delta, right?
No,
yeah, come on, it's more than a couple.
If you read the news, people say they hate airlines. And yet, by any measure, airlines have gotten a lot better. Why this disconnect? Why do people still love to say, "Oh, I hate airlines. They're terrible"?
Well, I don't hear a lot of people saying they hate Delta. In fact,
Okay.
I see just the opposite. Our Net Promoter Score, which is what we measure customer satisfaction, is at an all-time high, and it's been growing every year, and it will be growing again this year as we look at the development we're putting into it. This year, we're going to be putting $4 billion into the capital of this company, meaning investing in new airplanes, technology, facilities. We're building, we broke ground last month on the new LaGuardia facility. This is an industry that has not had the level of investment in infrastructure longer term that it needs because it went through a death cycle 10 years ago. We've come out the other side of it. We're making a lot of progress, but we're bumping against infrastructure limitations, whether it's in the air and air traffic control, particularly up here in the Northeast, whether it's in the airports on the ground, whether it's even on the airplanes in terms of getting new interiors and new planes flying, and it's in technology. So we're investing a lot because we've got to make up for lost time. We're doing well with what we've got, and we're making more and more progress.
Yeah.
And I think if you continue to look at the trajectory that we're on, we will get to the point, once again, that people will say, we love flying on Delta. And which, by the way, more people than ever are saying that. So I'm sure there's some airlines that you talk to that people say that about.
Yep.
I trust it's not my company.
So there's an old story about you, and I don't know how much of it is true. I presume it is, but you've been at Delta a long time, and more than a decade ago, you left the company, right?
I did.
Because you didn't like the direction it was going? What happened?
I did leave the company in 2004. I was frustrated with the decisions that were being taken. The company had gone through a pretty big management change in the late 90s, and actually that's when I joined the company too, as part of that change. And unfortunately, there were too many people that came into the company that didn't have a real appreciation for what makes Delta great. What makes Delta great are the people of this company. We all love the planes, we love the technology, we love the new airports, but none of that's a competitive advantage. Our competitive advantage are our people and our culture. And when you start to take away from the culture and you start to violate what are some of the principles that helping our people feel like they're there as your greatest asset, and they wind up feeling like they're nothing but a cost to be eliminated, you break the bond and you start to lose heart over time. And I could see it happening, and I was a voice in the wilderness that couldn't be heard. And so sometimes the best voice you have is when you decide not to have a voice anymore and you leave. And then 6 months later, they called and asked me my opinion. And I told them, they said, okay, this is what we got to do. And we've been doing, been making some of the progress ever since.
So you're basically trying to build a premium airline, right?
We are not trying to, we are a premium airline. Today in the domestic space, we generate about a 20% premium over our domestic competitors. And the reason for that is the quality of the service. There's a direct correlation between our Net Promoter Score and our revenue premium that we can track. And we are that way. We are not there yet in the international space consistently enough, particularly in the Pacific, and we're making progress, and the 350 is going to go a long ways to helping us improve that in the Pacific space, but we're on a good path there.
Okay. Some of you may know the A350 has a very interesting product on it in Delta One, your business class. I guess you're the first US airline flying a wide-body jet, because JetBlue wants to make this clear, with suites with doors. Is that a gimmick? Do people actually want a suite with a door?
I think so. Yes, the 350, which we are the US launch customer on, operating and starting next month, we won the Crystal Cabin Award this past year, which is the international award for the best innovation in terms of aircraft cabin interior and seat. Typically, that's won by the Middle Eastern guys that throw billions of dollars at stuff, that have an unlimited checkbook. For a U.S. airline to win that award for the first time in 10 years, I'm really proud of our team, and we should all be proud that American ingenuity still is alive and well and can continue to make innovation in this day and age, in our space, in that regard. And our business cabins are going to have an enclosed door. It'll have a light on it, so when it's closed and you want to sleep, you don't want to be disturbed, our cabin attendants and flight attendants will know not to disturb you. If you want something, you can turn the light on. And it really is about privacy and creating more space for our high-value customers and our business cabin. People need to utilize that space, whether it's to get stuff done or access to Wi-Fi or sleep or be entertained.
Okay. One of the buzzwords that I hear about all the time is cabin segmentation. Your president talks about it a lot. It used to be you had business class and you had economy. Yeah. Now you have business class, you have premium economy, you have economy with a little bit more legroom, you have regular economy, and you kind of have basic economy. Why segmentation so important for an airline?
Well, if you think about why we haven't had a premium over time, is that we basically had one size fit all. And it's very, very hard in a market, because we are a marketing company. We're not just, we're an airline, and we have great technical depth. But we also have to price, we have to sell, we have to market to consumers. And we have 200 million people that we carry a year. It's a massive segment of society. And if you don't have the tools to distinguish and differentiate in the consumer's mind as to why they're paying more, they rebel. They don't want to pay. They feel like they're getting screwed. And the classic example 10 years ago is you'd have a business customer paying $800 sitting in a middle seat next to someone who booked their ticket 6 months earlier sitting in an aisle seat for $69. Inevitably, the conversation comes up as to how much did you pay for the ticket. They both, certainly the business customer doesn't feel good. The guy that paid $69, you're saying, well, I better keep paying $69 because I'm not going to get screwed by this. So you've got to find a way to create differentiation in consumers' minds, and you need to give them some choice. And legroom is important on aircraft. The loyalty rewards are important. That's why we've made changes to the loyalty program to reward greater revenue share in the consumer wallet. And customers at least can then start to drive a relationship between how much they're paying for a ticket, what they're getting for the ticket, and then the customer satisfaction. And again, as I said earlier, our customer satisfaction scores, both for business traveler as well as for our leisure customers, are the highest in our history. So I think it's working. We decided 10 years ago, Brian, that if we were just going to go down the path of being a commodity, that the lowest fare wins, we're not going to be around. We need to get paid as a premium airline. We need to differentiate. We have a commodity component to our business. But if that starts to overrun the cabin, we're going to lose. And that's what you see us doing.
Okay. So a couple weeks ago, Skift sent me to London. I interviewed Emirates President Tim Clark, and he actually said that there's
Sure, he has some very nice things to say about it.
Well, I'm not going with open skies here. I'm going with something that I feel is even more interesting, at least from a passenger experience standpoint. He said that there's one untapped segment on the airplane. He said there absolutely could be a section in the back with 28-inch pitch and extra slim seats, and people would buy it, and they'd be happy with it.
They might buy it at Emirates, and that's not going to be available for sale on Delta.
It won't happen at
It ain't happening at Delta.
Okay.
I said on CBS this morning that we're not going to have live telephone conversations on an airplane as long as I'm in charge.
Yep.
And so if any of you are disappointed, I'm sorry, but it ain't happening. And we're not reducing our pitch below 31. Not happening.
Excellent. So you thought I was going to open skies there, and of course Tim did talk about open skies. You have some pretty big opinions about the three largest Gulf carriers. Why do you think they're such a concern?
Well, the concern is about the future of our international footprint. We know as a fact that the Middle Eastern carriers, Qatar, Emirates, and Etihad, have been funded at least $50 billion by their governments. So we're not competing against airlines. We're competing against government agencies. And I don't care what business model you're in. If you're competing against a government agency, you're going to lose. And these are government agencies that are designed to take more and more international traffic away from international airlines. It's not just the US carriers. It's the European carriers, all of whom have been harmed, and then finally their governments have stood up and say enough's enough. It's the Asian carriers. You've seen a tremendous amount of harm there, whether it's Cathay or Qantas. Qantas was forced to do a JV with Emirates because they couldn't compete stand up. You know who the international flag carrier of Australia is now? Emirates. It's not Qantas. Okay, and we don't want that happening to our country. We don't want that happening to our opportunities. And we see it happening. We see a limit because not only are they subsidizing these carriers, the carriers then use the subsidies to keep fares at ridiculously low levels that we have a hard time competing with. And while from a consumer standpoint in the short term, they may say, well, that's a great bargain. They have a luxurious product. They have really low fares. I love them. I could understand that in the short term. But first of all, it's against the law, because they signed a treaty that said the government would not interfere in the competitive landscape in terms of us opening our market to it. So they're violating the law. And long term, it's going to hurt U.S. customers. And we have an administration that won on the platform of protecting U.S. jobs and enforcing U.S. trade treaties. And we think our industry is, you talk about the trade dispute between Bombardier and Boeing. I've told the Boeing people this. I find it the ultimate hypocrisy that Boeing is alleging a trade war and subsidies of this small little Canadian airline for a product they don't make, while they're supplying the ammunition to the biggest subsidy that's going on in international trade today, which are these Middle Eastern carriers that are not profitable, that are losing a tremendous amount of the capital that's being invested. Look at Etihad for an instance that, or look at Qatar for that matter.
Right.
Qatar is the worst performing financial airline in the industry, and they're propped up by their government. And listen, we can look the other way and let them realize that our international traffic is going to be taken by these carriers, or we can stand up and fight. Our jobs are not for sale, and our people are behind it, and we're not going to let this go down.
So Etihad just reported a loss of nearly $2 billion.
$3 billion.
$3 billion?
$3 billion.
Okay. And
it's pretty hard to lose $3 billion. Even in the airline industry, it's pretty hard to lose $3 billion.
Has there become an argument, especially as the oil economy has fallen a little bit, that these airlines are going to fail on their own?
They're not. They never stood on their own. Okay, it's not that they're going to fail on their own. Until the government pulls the subsidies, they're going to keep propped up. So if you've already invested $50 billion, and by the way, they've got the airplanes on order to create the next $50 billion of subsidies that's happening over the next 5 to 7 years. I don't see them pulling it. What I see is our government doing what they ought to do, which is investigating the issue.
Okay. So you've had some tough
I've
talk.
I've got some opinions.
Okay, you've had some tough talk with me here about Boeing. There are basically only two manufacturers that make large jets. Recently, you've bought a lot more Airbuses than Boeing planes, but I mean, will you still look at Boeing aircraft?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. People don't appreciate, because we have bought Airbus recently, but we are the second largest operator of Boeing equipment in the world today. And when you think about our partnerships, our network of partnerships, we now are the single largest owner of Aeromexico with a 49% stake, all Boeing mainline fleet. We're a 49% owner of Virgin Atlantic, which has a significant Boeing footprint. Gol in Brazil, we've got an ownership stake, which is an all Boeing fleet. So if you put our family together, we actually are the largest Boeing operator in the industry. So we've got a good relationship with Boeing, but when it comes to mixing politics and commercial, we'd like to keep the politics out, and we wish everybody would, and focus on the real commercial aspects and abide by the laws and the treaties as they're written.
Wanted to ask you about something more fun.
Thank you.
Loyalty.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of frequent flyers, me included, nothing excites us so much, and it is completely irrational. We love a free upgrade to first class.
Everybody loves free something, right?
And
maybe we should give free T-shirts out and then just throw them out on the cabin rather than we don't have to deal with the upgrade
so maybe
issue.
about 3 years ago, you guys came out with this really odd strategy. You said, we're going to sell our first class seats to paying customers.
Yeah.
And people are upset.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that?
Well, any business where you give the majority of your best product away for free doesn't work. Okay, it just doesn't work. Okay, I mean, I appreciate anytime you take away something that was free, people are going to get upset. It doesn't matter whether that's upgrades, baggage fees. You go on the list. There's a reason why we were all in pretty bad economic shape. But this is the best real estate on the plane, and while we appreciate the loyalty of the customers flying there, we couldn't just continue to give it away. We only had about a 15% paid load factor in first class. Okay, we're not going to wind up selling it all. We're going to protect a portion of it, and a meaningful portion of it. But until we got to our comfort class, the premium economy section, where people did have a soft landing when they didn't get the upgrade, but they had a place to go to. We couldn't sell upgrades. Now we are selling upgrades, but we monitor that to make certain that there's a line that we don't cross, and it's a line we carefully watch between free and paid. And I think our team does a nice job of it. But it's something that we had to do.
So if you were at 15% load factor a few years ago, where are you now in first class?
We're probably closer to 50%.
Okay, and you do want really loyal Delta flyers to sit up front for free sometimes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and that's an important part, and I agree with you. That is actually one of the best benefits of the loyalty program, because people tend to save their miles to use on trips, later in life when they have a chance, but they'll use the upgrades now because a lot of companies don't pay for it.
Another odd thing that you did somewhat recently is you said, we have all these frequent flyer miles, and we give them out improperly. If you buy a cheap ticket, you get the same number of miles as if you buy an expensive ticket.
Yep.
So now if I'm on a cheap ticket, I hardly get any miles. Why'd you guys do that?
Well, if you look at it, you're running a business, and you reward customers based on how long they sit on the plane, regardless of what they pay. The same as that fellow I mentioned earlier that's paying $800 and sitting in the middle seat. And not only is he upset he paid more dollars, he actually is then getting the same number of points as the person sitting next to him. It's not a logical assumption. Now, it's something that we started. The airline started loyalty programs 25 years ago, and as I told people, it's like changing Social Security, going in and re-engineering that. But if a customer is going to give you more value, it makes all the sense in the world to give them greater return for the value they're giving us, and that was the change that we've made, and we've tweaked it, and we've got a pretty complicated system now with qualifying segments and qualifying miles and dollars spent, and I'd like to, and I think we will get to a point where we continue to simplify the structure. But loyalty does have a revenue component to it, and we're trying to better align that.
Great. We have a few minutes here for audience questions.
Sure.
Let's see. I'm going to try out this iPad. It didn't work yesterday, but we'll see. No. We're going to have to look at the big screen. Let's see, 2 questions about the GDS. We'll go with the second one. How do you see the future relationship between airlines and GDSs?
So we are, I view the GDS as partners in the travel world. I know 15 years ago, there were some drawn out, pretty bitter fights when the cost of the booking was substantially higher than we thought the economics that we were receiving in return are. But we've eliminated most of the cost friction between us and our GDSs. Travelport, for example, is a very close partner of ours. And what we want the GDSs to do is to be incented to get aligned with our strategy of selling those premium products that you talk about, being able to bring premium revenue and customers to Delta, and for them to share in the rewards of that. That requires an investment on the GDS's part to be able to market and sell the product just like we do on Delta.com and not have it be commoditized in their broader offerings. So there's a lot of technology that's being developed to help market it better. We're signing agreements, as you probably know, with the GDSs to give them greater access to our premium content. And in return, there's some premium revenue and premium benefit for them. So I don't view them as an enemy. I really do view them as part of our travel partnership in terms of making the ecosystem work better.
That's good, because there's some of them in the audience.
I know they're in here. I know. And while I called out Travelport, I love Sabre and Amadeus, all of you guys.
Take another look.
Bring us premium, okay?
Let's see. You touched on this a little bit, but we'll go again. Why do the U.S. airlines tend to lag in service and product versus the rest of the world's brands? I bet you'll disagree with that.
I do disagree with that. And again, I think it depends on the segment you're talking about. It depends on the cabin and the airlines. We track as I said, our Net Promoter Score regionally based on our international competition as well as in the U.S. space. In the transatlantic space, the Delta product I put up in it from customer satisfaction scores consistently scores in the top tier, alongside Virgin Atlantic, alongside Swiss does very, very well in that segment, and we do very, very well in that segment. You go to Asia, and I'd agree with that. Asia, we lag substantially. We don't have the product in there. The 747's time has come and gone. We need to get new product in there. Our people need to continue. We're going through a significant amount of training and customer experience and cultural understanding and sensitivities of the Asian traveler versus the American traveler and their needs, and you're going to see us continue to improve our Asian Net Promoter Score for today is a negative. And by the way, it's negative for all the U.S. carriers. We're fortunately a smaller negative versus the other carriers. Yep. But you can't have in the business world, you can't have your most expensive fleet flying the longest distances with a customer base that does not prefer you, that prefers somebody else. It doesn't work, the business model. So we're working and tweaking and finding ways to make that work. The perception tends to lag the reality. If you look at it within the U.S. model, our rankings are great and our customer scores are great. We've won Business Travel News Airline of the Year 6 years running, and fingers crossed, we're going to find out soon on 7 here. We look at our Net Promoter Scores, we look at our revenue premium. Our customers telling us in the U.S. we're doing a great job, but we got to be seen as more than just a U.S. airline. We got to be seen as a global airline with a U.S. home, and which means we have to invest a little differently in the international space. So one of the reasons we're investing as heavily as we are in our partnership strategy. We're going to be investing, and we'll have an ownership stake in the Air France KLM group here in the next couple of weeks that we're going to, and we'll be inside the boardroom as one of the owners of Air France KLM. We're an owner of Virgin. We're an owner of Aeromexico. We are an owner of China Eastern. So we're playing the long game in the international space, and it's complicated because all the regions have a different need. But we're going to figure it out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the time, Ed.
Brian,
Really
thanks for having me.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.